Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon if you're watching this later on in the day, and welcome to Hive in Session, the first one of a series of little 10, 15-minute jam sessions where we are bringing people from inside Hive, people from outside Hive together to talk about things that are going to directly benefit HR communities, HR practitioners, but also businesses as a whole. Try and get you guys thinking about things a little bit differently than you might have done previously. So really pleased to be joined today by our head of marketing, Neil Hancock. Neil, thank you for coming on with me.
My pleasure. Good to speak to you, Ben.
Absolutely tremendous as always. And now I understand that today's topic, Neil, is going to be about segmentation and sort of how HR departments can start thinking like a marketer might think to sort of achieve different results in the way that they approach particular things. Is that right?
Yeah, completely. So you might find it a bit strange that head of marketing is here talking about something for the HR folk, but segmentation is something that both departments need to be experts at, and it's something that marketing has been doing incredibly well for a number of years. And it's something that we thought, actually, why not start to try and learn and develop some of those skills and implement them in a way that it might make some benefit for the HR and HR folk themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, well, we talk a lot as the company that we do, and certainly practitioners that I speak to, about the importance of personalization. We talk about and trying to make the survey that you're creating and designing feel as relevant to the people that you're going to be sharing it with as possible. And we know that that's kind of very true as it relates to marketing content and internal comms, if you want to call it that as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess a good question to start with, Neil, is what would be sort of a traditional way that people might look at segments and segmentation, and then kind of where is marketing kind of pushed the space?
Yeah, look, I think to start, let's kind of go back right to when segmentation, certainly in a marketing perspective, began. So it began around in the 1920s. And the reason segmentation started were savvy businesses decided and realized that they can actually discriminate on pricing based on wealth. So they decided they could sell the same product to different individuals based on the amount of money they have, because it wasn't easy to necessarily understand that this was priced X over here and Y over here. So actually it started as a way to discriminate against those who had a little bit more wealth. As that started to then develop into sort of the 80s and 90s into things like hypersegmentation, that's when we started to realize that segmentation could actually be a benefit to the individual rather than necessarily just a profit-making scheme for the business. The issue is, however, is quite a lot of people don't develop it beyond, as you mentioned here, the kind of simple segments. So demographic is a perfect example of gender, age, location, those kind of things, geographic segmentations as well. The challenge you have with something like traditional segmentations is if you purely segment your workforce on, or your target audience, in my world, on gender, you're making the assumption that every man or every woman or everyone who, whatever they identify as, are exactly the same as individuals. And a good example to challenge that, and polar extremes are Barack Obama and Donald Trump are both exactly the same gender, but have completely different thinking preferences. They want different things from their role when they were president of the United States of America. So if we try and communicate to them both in the same way, one of it's going to resonate with one and not resonate with the other, or it's going to resonate with neither because you're trying to talk to both. Similarly, when you look at things like age, and again, using the kind of leaders of different states, Kim Jong-un is the same age as Prince William, but both of those two individuals again, would want to be communicated in a completely different way and have different desires for what they want to achieve in their roles. So you can't segment by age either, because you're not making an assumption that they're both going to want the same sort of things. So those are the challenges of using traditional segments, really what marketers have been driving forward, and where I personally believe HR folk can start to take some benefit from, is using more behavioral type segments or psychographics. So these are looking at things like people's values, people's personalities, people's lifestyles. So you can be 21 or you can be 45, and you can have similar values or similar lifestyle stages, and therefore are going to start having prioritizing different elements of a benefits package or different elements of how you work or your working environment. So let's pick, for example, having young children. So I myself have got an under 4-month-old. So I really benefit the ability of being able to work from home in this climate. As we look to return to the workplace, I value the working from home more than someone who may be my age, but living on their own, and actually want to have that chance to get out the house and see more people more regularly than myself, who treasure the ability that I can go and grab a glass of water and have a couple of minutes with my 4-month-old, which I couldn't do when I had my first child. So if you start to analyze people by life cycle stages, you're going to find that I'm in a group potentially with somebody completely different age and different gender to me, but have the same desires from what I want to achieve.
So, it occurs to me that certainly by doing something like that, then you're sort of, you're not taking the path of least resistance per se, and kind of looking by trying to address everything to, I suppose, the widest possible market. You're also sort of diluting the potential for insight and results that are going to come back. Excuse me. Whereas, once we start to tailor the types of people that we go out for, that we refer to them here as demographics, but certainly start to flex those different triggers up into ways to identify people, then you're able to get, as I say, like, paint a much richer picture of the type of things that matter to people. Because you and me, Neil, are of a similar age, but we're in kind of very, very different personal circumstances. So what is important to you from again, the working from home example is a perfect one. I think I'm probably someone who might relish being in the office slightly more frequently, but the reality is, you've correctly said it, is that for the past 12 months people have saved 2.5 hours probably a day that would have just been the commute that is breakfast with their kids every day, or an hour's exercise in the morning and things. And so it really does stand a business in good stead to be able to identify these types of people more easily, and look to have them kind of catered to as best as they can.
Precisely. And if you look at the reason why we do it in marketing, it's about making our message resonate with as much as possible with as many people as possible. And that's why segmentation happens. So if I try and talk to everybody in the world about my product I'm selling, it will resonate with some, but it'll resonate with some people very little, but probably not resonate with anybody, because I've tried to talk to too many people. It's the same when you look at it, creating a survey, when you're trying to understand pockets of employees within your business. If you try and talk to them all in one go, you're potentially only going to resonate with 70% of some of them. Whereas if you start to identify, well, what is it that I want to know about certain groups? And in marketing, it would be, I've got a particular product that's designed for a particular need. Therefore, I'm going to find people who that is their most important need. So if you were to segment, for example, if I were to do and segment and survey all the males in the business, you and I would have different preferences and different views on different things. But actually, if you were to segment people based on whether they have young children, you might find more consistency in what they want to communicate. And therefore, you can actually make better decisions because you've got better, richer data, rather than these polar extremes. Whereas I go back to the likes of surveying Kim Jong-un and Prince William, you're going to have very, very polarized responses to questions, which is very difficult to actually build strategies to deliver against. Because is that good or is that bad? Well, actually, if you take an average, it's bang in the middle. But realistically, you've got one person saying one thing, another saying another. Whereas if you start to segment by groups, you will find that there are less polarized scoring, and the scoring is more collective. It may not be positive. There may still be problems you have to address, of course, but it's easier to create strategies to understand change if you can get rid of these real extremes in your scoring system.
And I suppose if I'm looking at this from, if I'm an HRD or someone in the people function kind of watching this and thinking about, I'd love to embrace something a little bit more like this. What is like an easy sort of frictionless way to kind of get this information from, whether it be in your case, Neil, from clients, from customers or prospects, but equally from the workforce? I mean, are people reasonably willingly giving of this information?
So in the marketing world, yeah, very much so. When you ask that kind of question, how do we start to find this information out? Now, we're fortunate in marketing that things like Facebook, people actually give away a lot of information without realizing it. It means it's easy to us to segment using tools like that. But actually, the traditional model and the correct model is to ask people, give people an ability to share more information with us, which means we can tailor their journey better. Now, not everybody is willing to do that. A lot of people are skeptical, particularly in the marketing world, of what you're going to do with that information, which is fine. You're not going to get to know everything about everybody. But certainly in a working environment, start to ask people to segment themselves by some things they're prepared to give that information to you. If they're not, then you're always going to have a catch-all. You're always going to have some generic messaging because they don't want to inform you more information to make it more targeted. But you can certainly go out and sort of ask people these kind of questions, get them to segment themselves into groups you're comfortable with. There's some things, and I'm sure all HR folk will know this, I would stay away from because there are creating some sensitive data elements. But certainly there are things that are less sensitive, that are still personal, that people are willing to share with you. Some of it you'll know yourself, but again, I'd recommend that you let them start to fill those gaps in. And it kind of moves towards a tool that we use in marketing that there's absolutely no reason why HR folk can't use, which is creating, we call them buyer personas, but certainly in a HR environment can still create an employee persona. And this is starting to build up a character of a group of individuals. So you could start to understand the group without necessarily needing to understand any individual within that group. If you look at traditional buyer personas, they include things like gender and like age and like location, because they may be important factors to you. But actually, if you look at an employee persona, you can start to create groupings around things like how much control does someone have over their job. So if somebody's got a lot of autonomy and they're relatively senior, that may be a different factor for them in terms of whether they're having a great day of work versus someone who can't control anything. They've got to come in and do what they're told, and it's very repetitive, because that'll then blend on to what does someone's job mean to them. So is a job just a job? They need the job because they need some money, and actually that's all it's ever going to be. Well, you can put those in a certain grouping compared to those who actually feel like their job represents who they are. Or you can see people who are trailblazers, for example, people who are consistently wanting to develop and grow and get further versus those who are just comfortable and happy and their job doesn't define them as who they are. So you can start to use this tool to create personas to then effectively communicate towards that persona rather than necessarily having to have one individual in mind that you're communicating towards.
Yeah, and I think that serves multiple purposes. Certainly from an HR perspective. I mean, it occurs to me that if you understand these personas within your workforce, you're more efficiently able to communicate to them internally. If you understand that there is let's say a particularly prevalent persona that is particularly successful, or that you identify that the organization needs more of, that informs a recruitment strategy. Likewise, it kind of informs intent and necessity around retention. But it also, at kind of that initial on the front end, that sort of strategy piece, it occurs to me that you are only going to get more of a sense of buy-in by letting people know that you're trying to speak to them on as personalized a basis as possible. And you also get to lay the groundwork for what it is that they might be able to expect in return. Because as you correctly pointed out there, Neil, like we quite willingly give our data on social media platforms and internet cookies and browsing histories and all that kind of thing, because we are sold the illusion and sometimes the reality of convenience, right? Of not having to type the same thing into the search bar over and over again. And, likewise, if as an HR function, we're able to kind of communicate to our employees that there is this implicit commitment to making things better off the back of, having a little bit more data from them as it relates to not necessarily identifying them, but being able to communicate with them more efficiently, then it stands to reason that you would get, more buy-in, greater participation rates, and then kind of the thing that we're all in this for is a greater level of insight from which to build strategies on.
Yeah, completely. If you look at a simple way of approaching it, look at people's rewards and benefits package. A lot of businesses create a one-size-fits-all rewards and benefit package. Unfortunately, that one-size-fits-all fits none, because nobody fits perfectly inside these boxes, or certainly nobody wants to fit perfectly inside these boxes. So why didn't you go out and start build personalized reward and recognition platforms? So my lifestyle and what I would like from rewards and benefits is very different to what a 21-year-old would. And very different to what I wanted as a 21-year-old, if I'm being honest. My pension is more valuable to me now than it certainly was back in those days. So, that's a very easy example of where people can start to benefit from segmenting, asking questions properly around what it is they want in that world. And to kind of end on, really, Ben, the point that you made there as well is this: we're talking about using segmentation to allow you to survey better and get less polarized results. But of course, segmentation in marketing, and it should also be in PR, is an internal communication tool or a communication tool. If you're talking from one to all, and many businesses listen to this, hopefully, not hopefully, but will necessarily resonate with them, that they might put a message out to all and it not resonate or not land how it anticipated with the majority of people. And that's because you're using a one-to-all communication method. If you could start to segment your employee base, you can start to create one-to-many, one-to-few, and ultimately one-to-one communications. Your talking to that group in a way that resonates with them because it's about their problems and their issues and their concerns, and then talk to this group differently because they have different concerns and different issues and different problems. And then you'll find that your message will start to resonate with more because you're tailoring it for them. You're making it personalized, even if it's not one-to-one, because I appreciate if you're 1,000-person business, that's very challenging to do. But certainly try and go from rather than 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100. That's good. You're going to have 10 of those messages tweaked ever so slightly. You're going to find that you're going to get more engagement, more buy-in on the things that you want to do, because people feel like you've made a bit of an effort to know me better and talk to me how I want to be talked about.
Fantastic. Well, look, Neil, I think that's a great place to leave it there. Neil, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Good to speak to you, Ben.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Hive in Session. We'll see you in the next one.